Are the cops going to come pull me over? They probably are, aren't they? There's like the third, fourth time I've driven past. All right. Hello and welcome to the Show and Shine. I'm here in a very different location today. I thought I'd take a break from driving because there's something that I really wanted to talk about and get my point across properly. So about 6 months ago, December, January-ish, the state government introduced a proposed legislation called Section 111. Now, what this was, it was a very broad and pretty abhorrent piece of legislature saying that any device from a vehicle could be banned at the police's discretion in Western Australia. Whilst on the surface, I'm sure the government had the best of intentions, as they always do, the legislation was way too broad. It would have meant that down the track the police could say no one can have a mobile phone carrier in their car, or no one can fit a tow bar, or no one can fit a roof pod. Or, you know, they could even go as far as to say you can't change the stock wheels on your car, or you can't fit an exhaust, or it's a device of no description. It can do anything, but the police can ban it, which is pretty abhorrent. So obviously COVID-19 comes and their government's too busy passing other legislation such as, closing the borders down and things like that. But second last day before Parliament sits, they reintroduce this with pretty sneaky tactics, to be perfectly honest. So this section of legislation was provided as a supplementary act. Don't know the exact wording, but effectively they tacked it on to the end of drug and alcohol reforms for fines for drug and alcohol drivers. They didn't discuss it at all in Parliament. They just put it on after the debate happened, which is not the best way to talk about brand new legislation, especially when it's completely unrelated to the legislation that's been tabled. About 12 or 18 months ago, the WA Police website stopped advertising the daily locations, and they actually moved to a document that specified all the possible locations of a speed camera rather than the individual one on a particular day. I drive with a radar detector and have done for many years. Now, it's not, originally my intent was to avoid speeding fines, but what I found is it took my focus away from glaring at the speedo every 5 seconds, wondering what speed I'm doing, and maybe missing a speed zone change, or missing someone walking across the street, or missing someone running a red light, and it made me a much more aware driver than if I didn't have it. And you know what I found? I found that I actually was driving slower about 95% of the time, and actually within the speed limit pretty much all the time. There's a very common argument, which is don't speed if you don't want to get caught. And sure, you know what, we can all drive 10, 15, 20 Ks under the limit and not run the risk of getting caught, but for 95% of the population, you're going to drive at the speed limit. You don't want to upset other drivers on the road. People have places to go and things to do. And if I drove 5, 10, 15 kilometres per hour under the speed limit, I drive nearly 50,000 Ks a year. That's going to make a huge difference to the amount of time I spend on the road. That's going to make a huge impact to the productivity of my work that I do. So I need to drive most of the time at the speed limit wherever possible. And yes, I use cruise control. I've got a car with adaptive cruise control, thankfully, and I employ that quite a lot. Probably I need the radar detector less than I used to with this new system, but even still, it's just that extra layer that I have where I can be more alert, paying attention to what's on the road. As of Thursday, this bill has passed the upper house. It was modified, so it may need to go back to the lower house. We're looking at a law that is passed as part of a broader range of changes in drug and alcohol reform. One other thing that I will mention is, while it was being debated in Parliament, they asked why the need for change, why the need for this, why the need for that. And the response from the sitting government was, well, every other state's done it, so why shouldn't we? Now, the McGowan government has based themselves on not doing what every other state does and not doing something just for the sake of it. Yet they come here and they introduce this new legislation, and they do it just because every other state has banned radar detectors. What sort of a What sort of an argument is that? Why don't we just open our borders because every other state has opened their borders?
So the government is acting to address this crucial road safety issue by amending the Road Traffic Act 1974 to specifically ban radar detectors. Now, as we've canvassed yesterday, Western Australia is well behind the rest of the country in relation to radar detectors. It has been over 20 years now that the rest of Australia has banned the use of radar detectors, and this reform, we believe, is long overdue.
It's not the right attitude. The right attitude is having evidence-based statistics and reasoning for why you're making a change. And when they were questioned in Parliament, they asked, where's your evidence that radar detectors cause people to speed more? And there is none. There's been no study conducted, there's been no evidence collected as to the actual impact of a radar detector. And if you take my personal anecdotal evidence, it's completely up to you if you do or not. But if you do choose to take my anecdotal evidence, I speed less with a radar detector than without. The legislation is written to say a device which is capable of alerting the driver to the presence of a speed measuring device. Now, if you're thinking, straight down the lines, that's a radar detector, that's a laser detector, that's an infrared measuring device. That could also include Waze. It can also include a vehicle-mounted GPS. Now, this was raised in the upper house as well, and it was argued around the fact of, an inbuilt vehicle GPS can tell you about the presence of a fixed speed camera or a point-to-point speed camera as well. The government was very clear that no, it was not their intention to ban those sort of devices, particularly seeing as they're inbuilt, and technically to seize that device, the police would need to seize the whole vehicle. That was taken off the table, but certainly it was still, they're including mobile phones that have the access to Waze, they're including vehicle-mounted GPSs that aren't part of the vehicle, the windscreen ones, they can do that, and those devices can tell you the presence of a speed measuring device. So what can we do from now? Well, there really isn't a whole lot we can do, but if you feel that you'll be affected by this law and you don't believe in it, or you just plain don't believe in the law, speak to your local Member of Parliament, tell them how you feel, tell them that this is a mistake, tell them that they've based the whole point of this government on evidence-based statistics, and there's none here. There's no evidence, there's no statistics. And if there is, show us, because it hasn't been provided up until this point. Thank you everyone for watching. I'll be back again with you shortly.